Thanks a lot, Professor Abhay Karandikar sir, Professor Bhaskara Murthy, and Professor Urvasi Sinha. Ladies and gentlemen, to conduct the panel discussions, I would like to invite Dr. Anima Joshi and Dr. Prabhat Rai. Dr. Anima Joshi and Dr. Prabhat Rai, please come on stage. Now stage is all yours. Thank you so much, gentlemen.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. I, Anima Johari, along with my colleague Dr. Prabhat Rai, are fortunate to have here with us eminent scientists, students, and researchers from all over the country. On this auspicious day, I welcome all of you. Just to mention, the National Science Day commemorates the remarkable contribution of scientists, promotes scientific temperament, and also highlight the importance of science in our lives. I am enlightened to share with you that for the very first time, we are having panel discussions on National Science Day. Today, on National Science Day, panel discussion on two themes will be covered in this session. First theme will be Bridging the Knowledge Gap for Effective Science Communication for VIKSIT-Bharat 2047. And in the second thematic discussion, we will be covering Strengthening Research and Developing Indigenous Technologies for VIKSIT-Bharat 2047.
Good afternoon, everyone. I, Prabhat Kumar Rai, along with Dr. Anima Johari, wish you a very happy National Science Day 2024. This session includes panel discussion on Bridging the Knowledge Gap, Effective Science Communication for VIKSIT-Bharat at 2047. And for this panel discussion, we have with us Sri Shashi Shekhar Vempati as moderator, and Sri Pallav Bagla, Sri Amit Paranjape, and Dr. Shubhashri Deshikan as panelists. Now, all the panelists of the panel discussion are requested to kindly come on the dais and have your seat, please. Now, it is indeed a pleasure to introduce the distinguished moderator, Sri Shashi Shekhar Vempati, who is a technocrat, columnist, policy thinker, and now an author. He has served in various leadership roles in the Indian technology, media, and public policy space. In 2023, his book on Honorable Prime Minister Sri Narendra Modi's monthly radio program, Man Ki Baat, titled Collective Spirit, Concrete Action, was released by the Honorable Vice President of India. He served as the CEO of Prasar Bharati, India's public broadcaster between 2017 to 2022, overseeing both Doordarshan and All India Radio, and many more leadership positions. His opinion columns are regularly carried by the Business Standard, Economic Times, among others. His papers focused on intersection of technology and public policy. Now I request Sri Shashi Shekhar Vempati sir to introduce other panelists and initiate the discussion. Over to you, sir, please.
Hello. Thank you and good afternoon and very happy National Science Day. very happy to introduce my fellow panelists. I'll start with Shri Pallav Bagla, who's perhaps the most well-known science journalist. In fact, when I was trying to rack my brain for, who are the science journalists that I know, I think his name is top of mind for his very long career in this space. He has won many national and international awards for his work. He anchored a weekly program, Life and Science with Pallav Bagla on the India Science Channel. He's contributed to several documentaries, won 3 national awards, including 2 from NCSTC for his science writing. In 2010, he was awarded the David Perlman Award for Excellence in Science Journalism. He runs a regular blog, very active on social media. Many of us would have seen him on TV at the space launches. So he's a very visible figure and an author of several books. And he's served as Sri Raman Pai Chair Visiting Professor in Science Communication at the National Institute of Advanced Studies. And he also serves as the President of the International Science Writers Association. So welcome, sir. To his left is Amit Paranjape. Amit is a good old friend. Both of us are alumnus of IIT Bombay. What is very distinctive about Amit is how he has used his social media, especially his Twitter handle, to constantly inform and update about the latest developments in science and technology. He's very passionate. Even though he may not hold any formal role, he is very passionate about the science institutions from the city that he hails from in Pune. Very, very strong voice in social media. So we'll be very interested to see what interesting, innovative suggestions you have. He's also the co-founder of Release Score, a company providing online skills assessment. He's a member of the Regulating Council of the Bhandarkar Oriental Research Institute, a very famous institute. He's a member of the Board of Governors of the COEP Technological University, and he's involved with IIT Bombay, IISER Pune, and he also served as the chairman of the Software and IT Committee of MCCIA, and he's an active member of TIE and other initiatives in Pune. To his left is Dr. Shubhashri Desikan. Dr. Desikan hails from Chennai. She has a PhD in theoretical condensed matter physics. She worked as a lecturer with BITS Pilani. She has been a publisher's editor with University Press. She worked with Hindu in science journalism for more than 10 years. She is currently with IIT Madras on their magazine Shastra, where she is an associate editor. She writes about all the latest developments in artificial intelligence, quantum computing. She was also the national awardee for science communication in print in 2017. So welcome. It is quite a difficult task after that scintillating presentation, which I think is perhaps a very fine example of what science communication should be, because it was a very profound subject presented in a manner that communicates science in a fun way, especially with young students and lay audience in mind. And one of the things that struck me during that presentation was a word that was missing. Quantum teleportation. Many of my generation, when we were growing up, for us science fiction was Star Trek on Doordarshan, and one of the very famous dialogues from Star Trek was beam me up, Scotty. So we had all these fantasy ideas of what quantum teleportation should be. So it's very interesting that in our lifetime we are seeing technology evolve so much that quantum technologies have become a serious subject of the national discourse, and that kind of sets the context for how science should be communicated. And so let me begin with you, Shri Bagla. What do you think should be the goal of science communication initiatives? How should science communication be conducted, especially with this target of a VIKSIT by 2047?
Well, let me thank the organizers for this invitation, and a very happy National Science Day to everybody. to have a Viksit Bharat, the foundation has to be on science and technology. भाई कोई है जो हिंदी नहीं समझता यहाँ पे? समझते हैं सारे? मेरे को जरा हिंदी बोलना ज्यादा पसंद है कि कहीं ना कहीं अगर 2047 तक हमें विकसित भारत बनना है तो साइंस और टेक्नोलॉजी के बेस के बगैर नहीं हो सकता वो। और वो जब होना है तो उसके साथ साथ अगर हम सही तरह से कम्युनिकेट नहीं करेंगे तो उस जितना विकसित नहीं होगी उससे ज्यादा मिथ्या बढ़ेगी और फॉल्सिटीज बढ़ेंगी। और आजकल की जो व्हाट्सएप यूनिवर्सिटी है वो तो MIT, हार्वर्ड और इंडियन इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ साइंस से ज्यादा काबिल है और वो इतनी ज्यादा फैलाती है कि कोई हिसाब नहीं है। तो बेस वो होना है और कम्युनिकेशन होना बहुत जरूरी है। अब देश का माहौल गर्म है, सियासत की दौर है, इलेक्शन सामने हैं और इलेक्शन जब सामने आते हैं तो कहीं ना कहीं मेरे को एक बारी हिला के जगाया जाता है। हर 5 साल में पल्लव को निकाला जाता है बाहर, आओ भाई। दूरदर्शन करता है या कोई और करता है, देखिएगा अभी जाग रहे हैं हम। अभी थोड़े दिन में याद आएगा लोगों को कि इलेक्ट्रॉनिक वोटिंग मशीन जो है ये कुछ खुराफात है। और हर इलेक्शन में मुझे खड़े होकर समझाना पड़ता है कि इलेक्ट्रॉनिक वोटिंग मशीन क्यों अच्छी है और क्यों उसने हमारे फ्रॉड बचाए हैं। तो इतने साल से हम 20 साल से यूज करते आ रहे हैं, लेकिन हर इलेक्शन में कोई ना कोई एक तुर्रम खां खड़ा हो जाता है कहने के लिए कि ये ठीक नहीं है। हारने वाला भी बोलता है, कभी कभी जीतने वाला भी बोलता है। अजीब और गरीब हालत है और हर बारी कहीं ना कहीं मुझे निकल के आना पड़ता है बताने के लिए। तो उस सब के बीच में जब हम कंटिन्यूअसली कम्युनिकेट नहीं करेंगे तो परेशानियां खड़ी होती हैं। और नेशनल साइंस डे पे बात करना माने मेरे लिए एक बड़ी बिटर स्वीट मेमोरी है। ये वो दिन है जिस दिन रामन इफेक्ट की डिस्कवरी हुई। But the actual application of Raman effect did not happen in India. We did not transcend from Saraswati to Lakshmi on Raman effect. The Raman effect remained a science discovery, but the entire use of Raman effect happened overseas. When you go to an airport, when a bomb sniffs, when your luggage is sniffed, it is through Raman spectroscopy. There are so many utilizations of Raman. So we celebrate science at one end, but we forget that we did not apply that same effect to the best of application we could have. That's why it is bittersweet. And also bittersweet because 90 साल से ज्यादा हो गए हमें नोबेल प्राइज नहीं मिला है। साइंस का नोबेल प्राइज नहीं आया हमारे पास। 1930 में डॉक्टर सीवी रामन को मिला, उसके बाद हमें साइंस में नोबेल प्राइज नहीं मिला। अब ये कहना कि हमें नोबेल प्राइज माने वही एक यार्डस्टिक होना चाहिए, नहीं। देश बहुत विकसित हुआ है, जब से इंडिपेंडेंस हुई उसके बाद से बहुत डेवलपमेंट हुए। शिप टू माउथ लिव करते थे हम, हमारे पास खाने की त्राही त्राही मची थी, अब हम एक्सपोर्ट करते हैं। तो बहुत चीजें हुई, लेकिन बड़ी साइंस की डिस्कवरी को कहीं हिंदुस्तान से रिकॉग्नाइज नहीं किया गया अभी तक। कितनी जल्दी होगा, मुझे उम्मीद है कि एटलीस्ट मेरे लाइफ टाइम में तो होना चाहिए। और आप लोग हो जिनको मुझे उम्मीद है कोई ना कोई लेगा एक नोबेल प्राइज। जब मैं एंटर कर रहा था यहां से तभी मैंने देखा था साइंस डे के सामने खड़े होकर स्कूल के बच्चे फोटो खींच रहे थे। वो फोटो मेरे को बहुत यादगार रहेगी कि कहीं ना कहीं उसमें कोई नोबेल लॉरिएट होगा।
So on that note, Amit, I think continuous communication and then taking scientific discoveries from the lab to the market and then of course a global benchmark, right? Now you've worked in the private sector, you have very innovatively used latest communication technologies. So what strategies, what approaches should we adopt in your mind?
Shashi, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to this panel. Also, thank you to Dr. Sharma, DST, Dr. Prabhat. I think this is a very important topic, and I'm glad that DST has picked this topic for the National Science Day, because science communication is often something that has not been given the focus that it should have been given at all levels, whether it is the smallest school or college to our universities or to the government. And so I'm glad that specific effort is being done today and in other committees and efforts to popularize science. Now, I'll just make one point about the original title of this whole Science Day event about VIKSIT by 2047, and then come to the communication and what should be done in that area. I think why science and why science communication? So if we have to be a developed country by 2047, let's look at what other developed countries have done. And what are some of the first developed countries that come to mind when you look around? Of course, one is the world's largest economy, that's the United States. Few other countries in Western Europe, of course, Japan, South Korea. What's common between all of them? All of them have done extremely well in science, right? Both basic science as well as applied science. And I think it's clear if you look at the last 200 years since the Industrial Revolution, that any country, any city, any company that is invested in science has developed faster than any of the other country or competing company. So there's plenty of evidence of why it should be done. And the fact that we haven't done thus far in the last 75 years is actually a sad state. I'm extremely glad that the Prime Minister has made this a priority for us. And if we have a long-term vision of 2047, we should be investing a lot more in science than what we are today. I don't see Dr. Karandikar here, but I'll just give you one number that we have to improve on, and that's the investment in science that we do as a country, as a percentage of our GDP. That's a metric that is being used worldwide. And many countries like the US, China, spend more than 2% of their GDP on science and R&D. Essentially, it's research and development, but I'm abstracting it to science. Now, some countries like South Korea, Israel do more than 4.5%. India, sadly, is doing less than 1%. So we are improving, but we need to do a lot more in improving that. And if we have to improve science at all levels, I think science communication is probably the most important area we need to look at right now for multiple reasons. Let's go back to a lot of the attendees here, which are school and college students. If science communication is not made by top scientists, research institutions, then many of the youngsters are not interested in science. Science often is a subject that is taught not very attractively and ends up being a boring and a tough subject and an unnecessary headache for many students, especially early on, right? And in reality, science is probably one of the most interesting subjects if taught the right way. Unfortunately, that is not being done. So how do we solve it? You solve it by obviously good, smart teachers, but you also solve it in today's era of social media, mass communication, TV, and all kinds of media we have is through science communication. So today we have a lot of interesting YouTube science channels out there, and I know some youngsters are actively following that. So social media, YouTube, and these kind of channels are extremely useful to improve that science communication and generate the interest in science amongst the youngsters. Now, what should us as seniors or institutions or others should be doing? I think every teacher at any level of any institution, whether it's a high school teacher, whether it's a college teacher, whether it's a professor at IIT, everyone should look at science communication as an intrinsic part of their function, their work function. And you mentioned I'm active on social media and Twitter, and I think many times some of these teachers look at social media and science publicity as not part of their job. Now, if you look at any good teacher around the world, and the previous lecture, brilliant presentation by Professor Sinha, she had a quote by Professor Feynman. And Professor Feynman probably was one of the greatest science communicators of the 20th century, right? So any good teacher, any good professor should look at science communication as an intrinsic part of their job. Now, you can do it in various ways. Have your own social media channel, create videos, explain, make science interesting to people around you. So that should be done across the board. And I think what DST can potentially do is, make this, we shouldn't make this a compulsory thing, but, somehow create incentives or create guidance for teachers to make this as an important function and use technology, use WhatsApp groups and other technologies. Similarly, training of, train the trainers, train the teachers, whether it's college professors, whether it's high school teachers. There's some very good initiatives happening. One of the institutions I'm associated with, ISER Pune, they have a very good program called iRise, which actually is focused on training high school and middle school teachers from small towns and taluka places on science. Now, how do you make science more attractive? So a lot of these things can be done. Technology is an important enabler. But let me stop here before you go through one full round and then maybe come back to this.
Yeah, in your comments, you jumped ahead a little of me, talking about metrics. So I'll come back to you on that. But I have to say, following Amit, I have learned a lot. I came across, this incredible digital library that the Bhandarkar Institute has made online. This blog that Professor Jayant Narlikar has, recently launched, one of India's, greatest astrophysicists. And then he shares all these videos of lectures. I think Pune that way, a very vibrant city, and we probably should, look to create such cities. Ms. Desikan, you come from Chennai. Amit talked about, institutions. So you went from, being a scientist yourself to media to now to a research institution. How do you see collaboration happening, from a science communication standpoint?
Let me also thank Dr. Rashmi Sharma for inviting me for this wonderful day. It's been a day full of very interesting lectures. And thank you for the warm introduction you gave me. I think one thing I've noticed is that you mentioned Jayant Narlikar, Professor Narlikar, and we just saw an example of two brilliant presentations. It's very rare to find academicians who communicate so well. So what I've observed in my stint at various places is that there are so many different talents, and definitely a collaboration is needed to bring them all together and brainstorm and really get things going. So what we can do is definitely, these are all sectors that don't meet at all. If you look at publishers and if you look at journalists, scientists, except when there's an interview or something, a journalist doesn't really meet a scientist. So if you're having a conference, for instance, you can have one panel on science journalism there and include discussions on how best to communicate this science. Because of course now many institutions have their own science communicators, but it takes a little more to do journalism than to be in an institute and communicate what that institute is doing. It often lends some credibility to when someone external talks about it. That way, blogs like Amit's are really wonderful to, now there are so many people who are working as independent journalists and bringing out the interesting aspects of science and so on. So you can easily identify these people, and there are not so many. There are still only more than a handful, but still only that. So you can identify new talents like this who are doing this out of their own interest and showcase their work. That's another thing that can be done in terms of collaboration. And what else? I also think that the more you discuss these things in public, the more things will get done. But there are three basic fundamental tenets of science journalism or science communication that I feel need to be appreciated. One is that science teaches you that if you take a blank canvas and paint it all in one color, it's easily done. But if you want to paint a complex picture, it's so difficult. So it's very easy to destroy things, but it's very difficult to build up some things. That's one lesson that science teaches us. And the other thing is that if you look at evolution has happened over billions of years, and it's built up this complex diverse world around us. You look around you, there are butterflies of different kinds, there are people of different cultures, and each of these things have evolved. There are ecological niches into which we have all come into. It's important to appreciate this. So an appreciation of this goes a long way in writing about things also. So we can have workshops in which this is made a component of this appreciation of the diversity of life, of the preciousness of life, of the environment around us, to a larger extent than is being done now, I think. There's a lot that can be done in these aspects. I'll stop there.
Very interesting observations. I was pleasantly, you talked about, evoking curiosity and, getting people interested and engaged. So when we had digitized the archives of All India Radio, we discovered some very early recordings from the 1950s. And one was a 3-day lecture series where each day he spoke for almost 90 minutes, Professor JBS Haldane, and he talks about all of this, evolution, life. So I feel that, as media has evolved, as we have more avenues to consume media, perhaps these engaging conversations have receded, right? When we were growing up, we used to watch Cosmos on Doordarshan by Carl Sagan. You had Professor Yashpal's programs. You had a lot of programs that would evoke curiosity. But now I'm guessing, with just the sheer amount of vast volume of media out there, maybe some of that is being lost. Yeah, please.
Yeah. One more thing I want to add is that now there's so much of talk about quantum and artificial intelligence and space science. There are these little areas which, not little, there are these areas in which there's a lot of communication happening. But there's so much in science that is not being talked about at all. So it would be very valuable if these collaborations could highlight the different aspects of science also. That's also an important.
The lesser known areas, absolutely. So, Shri Pallav Bagla, this tribe of science journalists, right? Why is it so small in India? What do we need to do to grow this tribe, right? And especially private media, the science coverage, perhaps maybe Discovery and the international channels do that. Indian channels, the science coverage is so poor, right? So what needs to change in your view?
I do not know how to react to that because I work in the private space. I have survived and lived in the private space for a very long time. More than 15 years in NDTV as science editor and complete freedom to do what I feel like. Nobody dictating anything to me, and a private channel will never keep you unless there are deliverables. So when I joined NDTV as their science editor, which is now long years ago, I joined there as probably the oldest person in the newsroom with double the age. The only person who had an age higher than me was Pranoy Roy and Radhika. I was untrained in television and survived there and made it. And I personally find science, technology, innovation, communication amazingly rewarding, amazingly rewarding. And let me say that. But just take what has happened in the last 2 days. I have slept for, 3 hours in 48 hours? There is so much happening in the country. The announcements around the Gaganyaan mission and the naming of the astronauts and the whole Gaganyaan mission, etc. And subsequently, today the Prime Minister has laid the foundation for the second launch site. Amazing developments are happening. Now, we need to find a way to communicate effectively all of that. I don't know about other channels, but last night at the Prime Bulletin, 9 o'clock, we did a show on the Fabulous Four. So, and every time we do coverage on science and technology, and we devote a lot of time on space and nuclear and defense, even though NDTV, I don't know whether the new dispensation or not, but the old dispensation never bothered about TRPs, but the numbers would hit the ceiling immediately. So there is tremendous appetite for information to be had in science, technology, also health. And we are sitting in the Vigyan Bhavan, and we are sitting here soon after the COVID-19 pandemic. And I'm amazed at the level of science communication which happened during the COVID-19 pandemic, and a country which could give more than 2 billion doses of vaccines. While I cover Chandrayaan, Mangalyaan, Gaganyaan, I still rate our vaccine yaan, which is the delivery of the 2 billion plus doses of vaccine, as a bigger achievement for the country, and at a point where every other country in the world was kind of breaking down. So and a lot of credit has to go to the communicators. There were almost no vaccine deniers in India, almost no. You had, at one level, President Trump giving away all kind of falsities from the presidential office of America. You never know, he may just come back in a few months. That's a separate story. But in India, we did not have all of that. And while our scientists did a great job in communicating, our science journalists, communicators, did an equally effective job in taking the message to the people. So there is a lot to celebrate, and नंबर से बात नहीं होती सर, इफेक्टिव कितना है. जो वैक्सीन के टाइम पे, कोविड के टाइम पे जो हमारा कम्युनिकेशन था, इतना शानदार कम्युनिकेशन किया हमने, and we need to celebrate that.
You wanted to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, Pallav, on two counts. One is the greatness of the COVID coverage, and also the satisfaction you get out of being a science communicator. But I don't agree in the thing that what he said was the implication that since he has made it very successfully in this career, there are equal opportunities available everywhere. That is something I don't agree with, because there are very few magazines and very few newspapers. Probably among newspapers, Hindu and online spaces are the ones that cover science well. And among magazines, probably IIT Madras Shastra and Science Reporter are the only two magazines I know of that are covering science. So the coverage and the credit due to science communicators during COVID, there were so many people who were working freelance, and so many hobbyists and so many scientists who got into the game, which was responsible for the effective coverage, I believe. So these people were not paid to do it, and we really need to think and influence news groups to start more positions for science communicators and science journalists. That's just a small opinion I have.
I think that's a very important observation that you made, and I'll go to Amit now. From a private sector standpoint, right, how do you create these career opportunities? And you also talked about metrics, so talk about that as well. How do we measure the effectiveness of science communication?
I think from a private sector standpoint, since you asked, I think it's important that ultimately a lot of these things, hobby and passion is one thing, and that was a good driver during COVID, and that continues, that should play an important role, but there should also be some commercial support for some of these activities done in media and in other channels. So I think the private sector needs to realize that science communication is an important activity worth supporting, whether it's through CSR funds, whether it's through other means, and there are various mechanisms through which private sector is trying to get more closely involved with the top institutions like IITs and other colleges, but that needs to improve. Again, at IISER Pune, I'll mention that there is some amount of engagement in this activity that is already happening, where science communication and science training efforts are being supported by the industry, but a lot needs to be done. And in terms of metric, I agree with Pallava that, numbers is not the only metric. It is, of course, an important metric, but it needs to be more than that in terms of how much people are really absorbing what is being discussed. And the ultimate metric for that would be how many school children are getting interested in science, enrolling in science, how much science funding is increasing across the society. I mean, ultimately, it's the corporate sector that also needs to. So coming back to your earlier question and tying it back to this, right? If you look at what are the roles in terms of science communication with all the parties involved. So let's look at the students first. So for students, they need to use whatever channels are out there, and trust me, today there are a lot of hobbies channels out there all over the internet, as was mentioned by Professor Desikan. Explore those, look at YouTube, look at Twitter, look at Instagram. There's a lot of information that is already available there. Just discover. For the teachers, high school and university teachers, I would mention, as I said, science communication has to be an intrinsic part of your job. Spend some time every day making beyond your regular students to get the message out. For the policymakers, I think science communication, and I'm very glad the fact that we are having an event like this and this panel is heartening that, policymakers are looking at science communication as an important activity. It needs to be supported and funded and a lot more. And for the corporate sector needs to fund this a lot more because, ultimately if they want to recruit good science students few years down the road, they have to create the atmosphere that is out there in terms of understanding and appreciating of the science. You're not going to create support for things like the space mission, things like quantum mission overnight. It's a 25-year, 30-year, 50-year challenge. So you have to start building up the grassroots level interest in those technologies. I'll just make one point, a request to all the people who are involved in science communication, whether amateurs or professionals. You saw an example of that in the previous presentation by Professor Sinha. You will see a lot of that in Professor Feynman's talks and many other talks. Bring in some humor and some interesting anecdotes. Far too often our science communication is boring, and I don't blame the students for losing interest on it very quickly. So I think whether it's journalists and especially for professors, I think don't treat science communication as a boring lecture. Make it interesting, make it humorous, make it appealing to the yes, storytelling. Storytelling is so important. So do focus on some of those things as well.
So how do you see AI impacting science communication, especially with,
AI, I'm glad AI came this late because these days, any panel discussion or topic doesn't end or doesn't start without discussion of AI. But, tools like ChatGPT, I'm pretty sure everyone here must have played around with ChatGPT. ChatGPT can help you significantly as a science communicator to quickly create some good content around the topic that you want to explain to your people. Could be to your friends as a student as well. So use tools like ChatGPT extensively to create good illustrations, good text around how you want to communicate it. Similarly, other AI tools can be used extensively for translations. I think that is extremely important. We have to take science communication into other Indian languages. And AI can help tremendously, even for live translations, some of the discussions that we are having, like for example, today.
Well, look, there's a lot of hype around AI. And I'm very, not one of those who's very enthused by AI. And a lot of people keep telling me, Pallav, you will lose your job by AI. No. Trust me, I am not going to be losing my job. 100% sure, AI will not take my job away. ChatGPT will find only what is there somewhere in the universe where it has understood it. If I am a science journalist, if I am true to what I am doing, and if I am doing news, then there is no way ChatGPT will know about it. जब मैं लिखूंगा, तब ChatGPT उसको चोरी कर सकता है. उसके पहले ChatGPT को नहीं पता लगेगा. और ये मैं दावे के साथ कह सकता हूं. और मेरे को इसमें रत्ती भर का डर नहीं है कि कहीं से भी ChatGPT मेरी नौकरी ले लेगा. अब कल की बात बताता हूं मैं आपको. गगनयान की बात हो रही थी. सारे लोग लगे थे, 4 एस्ट्रोनॉट हैं, चारों एयरफोर्स के पायलट हैं, भाई उसमें कोई लेडी नहीं है। बात हो रही थी। अब चैट जीपीटी से आप पूछोगे तो आपको सही जवाब नहीं मिल सकता। कल हमने लिखा है, आज आप ढूंढोगे तो चैट जीपीटी आपको जवाब दे देगा। तो आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस विल टेक यू ओनली सो फार, इट कैनॉट टेक यू वेरी फार, एंड फॉर अ डाइवर्स कंट्री लाइक आवर्स, there is no way chat GPT can take you a long distance. Ashutosh has disappeared. Ashutosh and I'm talking of Dr. Ashutosh Sharma. Both of us have a running discussion on this. He is kind of a believer of chat GPT. He writes up poems, he writes up stuff, he puts it out on social media. And that takes you only so far. It cannot take you. If that were the case, then every typist would be a Shakespeare. Not every typist has ever become a Shakespeare. So it will never happen. And don't be afraid of artificial intelligence. It will take you only so far and not far.
Never say never, but...
I am telling you, I am willing to put it on 100 rupee stamp paper and say, कि पल्लव की नौकरी नहीं जाएगी. अगर, see, I'll tell you, I'll explain that to you. If you are a journalist, then you are sure of your job. If you are a journalist, if you are churning out of pieces of paper which have been distributed by others and writing copy, then chat GPT will take your job away. If you are true to what his clan has been, then your job is secure for a long time to come.
If you could, give your concluding thoughts as well, especially from a researcher standpoint. How can researchers communicate more effectively their work, especially the lesser known areas that you pointed out earlier?
I think having been a researcher myself at one point in the dim distant past, I feel that many researchers don't see the difficulty of the lay reader when they write popular pieces. I think Urbasi's talk was something contrary to the point. It was, but most people, they don't, like when writing, suppose I suddenly use the word Wheatstone's network, the average person is not going to know what it means, right? So somehow it's so easy for someone who's steeped in science for 20, 30 years not to see the difficulty of the reader. That if they could overcome that barrier and make things a little easier, make things, draw analogies. Analogies are not accurate, they are inaccurate, and scientists hate that inaccuracy. So you have to overcome that a little bit to really bring out a good copy, I think.
That's very interesting, right? From objective to subjective ways of communicating ideas, right? I think on that positive note, I think we can probably draw this discussion to a conclusion. I thank the panelists for wonderful insights, and good to have disagreement, because otherwise if, everyone agrees with everyone, where is the discussion, right? So thank you, and thanks to DST team for organizing this.
From the audience? We should thank the panelists. Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. Now I would request Dr. Rashmi Sharma to felicitate the panelists and, of course, the moderator of this session.